Okay, hello, and welcome. Welcome back. Should I say it's been a while since we've done a BBA webinar, but what better webinar to come back with than this one we're going to be talking about today, which involves the entire construction industry, namely the supply chain, which everybody's involved in. The title today is Evolving Demands on the Construction Supply Chain. Delighted to be joined by two fantastic human beings. First, Ian McIlwee, CEO of FIS, Finishes and Interior Sector, and Stuart Green, Professor of Construction Management at University of Reading. Good morning, chaps.
Good morning.
Fantastic, lovely stuff. Right, I'm going to do my admin bit. It'll take about 2 to 3 minutes max. Most people that have been on one of these webinars will have seen this before, so apologies, but let's just get through it as quickly as possible. So all these webinars can be found on the BBA website. The URL's there, and if you want to subscribe to see what webinars are coming up, please do so with that URL. You obviously can't click the link because it's a presentation, but all these slides will be available on the webinar webpage once we've completed the webinar. As you can see with the little graphic that's going on down the bottom, this is how you find the webinars. You go to the BBA website, click on webinars, and future webinars and previous webinars are both on there. So you can catch up at any time, at any point. There you go, take a look back at some previous webinars. Let's skip on. Right, for those of you that don't know who the BBA are, they've been around for, I think it's 56, coming up to 57 years now, and they help construction and manufacturing industries build confidence in the innovations, the designs, the creations, and help them implement those throughout the entire supply chain. They look to develop long-term partnerships with clients, associations, and look to continue growth, not in just the UK, but on a global scale. But it's important to remember they have to remain reassuringly impartial, because that's part of what they do. They're also a for-profit organisation limited by guarantee. So what the BBA do is they look to reinvest for and in the industry as a whole any profits that they make to benefit stakeholders, which include everybody on this call today and the wider construction supply chain. What they actually do is, in general, they are more well known for product approval certification, which is the BBA agreement certificate. They also do reproduction certificates and HAPAS, which is highways in the UK. But what they're less commonly known for is the testing capabilities, auditing and inspection, management systems such as ISO 9001, and more recently UKCA and UKTA marking. So check them out if any of that sounds like your bag. A few numbers, let me focus on the big ones, obviously. So to date, they've issued over 6,000 certificates, and annually they do over 8,000 inspections and assessments. So they are on the ball with all of that. Okay, that's enough of the admin. That isn't why we're here today. We're here today to cover or look at the supply chain in construction. We'll go into detail in a little bit, but we'll cover what are procurement methods, just to give you a brief overview. We'll look at quality and safety, dangers of just focusing on that P word, price, tendering and contracts. Are they there to be broken, or should there be a more fail-safe solution? And we'll finalize or finish with an opportunity to share your voice and your thoughts. Huge opportunity to do that in terms of procurement and the construction industry in general, but we will get to that. Okay, let's get the ball rolling, chaps. I'm going to come to Stuart first. Stuart, so I just want to set the scene. When we talk about procurement methods in construction, what are we actually talking about for the people on the call today? Just give us a bit of a preamble.
Well, I think before we get too kind of obsessed with methods, I think it's important to understand what procurement is and what procurement means in the context of construction. I mean, in essence, procurement is about how we get things built. Construction procurement differs from other forms of procurement because each project is unique. An important variable and an obvious variable is geographical location. Procuring a building in Shetland is very obviously in need of a different approach to procuring a project in central London. Procurement's also shaped by market conditions. Procurement in times of economic boom requires a different approach to procurement in times of recession, not least because of the differences in the balance of power between the demand side and the supply side. Procurement is also always about meeting a particular set of employers' requirements. And these are unique to each project and to each client organisation. And so procurement in construction is not like procuring kind of paper clips. It's a very different sort of game, and it's about how we organise the interactions between the supply side and the demand side. Some clients, of course, are much more experienced than others. We talk about kind of naive clients, we talk about expert clients, we talk about repeat clients. And they also vary fundamentally in terms of their appetites for risk, how much risk they want to accept themselves and the extent to which they want to offset risks to others. They also vary in terms of the relationships they seek in their business interactions. Hence, they require very different procurement strategies with different priorities, which lead them towards different procurement methods. In construction, in organising a building, you have to organise the way you procure the design services, and you have to organise the way you procure the construction work. And there's a very real choice to be made in terms of whether you procure them separately or whether you procure them as an integrated kind of package. And the first preference will take you down a more traditional approach to procurement, whereby you commission design services from the professional team, you complete the design, you complete a standardized set of information, and then you issue that to the market for contractors to bid. The obvious alternative is a design and build route, and this comes in various kind of modes, whereby you contract with a single agency, a design and build contractor, to provide both design services and the construction work. I mean, that in essence, I think, is the starting point for any of these kinds of conversations. And the differences are what makes it interesting, and the differences in terms of appetite for different levels of risk and appetite for different sorts of relationship make it interesting, but also often challenging.
There's a few points there that I hadn't even thought about from a procurement perspective in terms of risk, location, and experience. You just think of procurement as this singular thing if you don't know it is in detail, as most people will. Ian, anything to add on that comprehensive introduction to procurement?
Stuart paints a picture of complexity, and I think therein lies the challenge. I think when I naively started doing some research, setting about doing some research in our sector on procurement, I don't think we fully grasp just how complicated and how many different processes and how it differs between different environments. Even different packages within the same supply chain can be different. You know, the way we procure M&E is different from the way that we procure interior systems. So there's probably some logic in the way that it happens in most jobs, but our suspicion is there's been a lot of evolution. For me, it feels like the interior system is a bit like Madagascar. You know, we've evolved in a completely different way to other parts of the continent, and we've got some really strange-looking animals here as a result.
You paint a pretty picture there, Ian. Thanks for that. So I just want to stick with you, Ian, as we move on to the next question and next topic. And this is about the quality and subsequent safety of a project and how procurement determines that.
It sets, I mean, the reason we're so interested in procurement at the moment is because it sets the stall out for the entire project. So FIS, we focus on quality through three key pillars. And we're a supply chain organisation, so just for background, we represent the interior sector predominantly. So we have manufacturers, distribution, main contractors and specialist subcontractors all within our community. So we're very much about trying to solve the problems rather than blame somebody else for it. So we focus on three Ps: product, process and people. So it's selecting the right product, it's installing it in such a way that the integrity of that product can be maintained, and it's doing that with competent people. And that's the three things that we have to get right if we're going to deliver quality in construction. So procurement does set the framework for this. And if you read, whether it be Egan, Latham, Farmer, the government construction sectors deal, the CLC roadmap, they all talk about this, that procurement has to change, procurement has to evolve in order for us to evolve the sector. I mean, the construction playbook, which is the latest sort of value-led, talk about value in procurement, talks about improving the procurement processes will play a huge part in setting the tone for any construction project. We talk about transformation, we talk about innovation, we talk about modern methods of construction, but we don't, I fundamentally don't believe that we had a procurement system that currently leads us to deliver that in an effective way. The faster, greener, better framework that surrounds transformation. It tends to generate, really, I've been involved in numerous discussions about transformation, and it tends to degenerate into two things. We end up with the discussion on the bridge of the Orca, remember the one from Jaws, where everyone sits around and blames, this is when a main contractor took my leg in '89. It's that sort of, we identify the problems and we blame everybody else. Or we end up with a magic bean discussion, Jack and his magic beanstalk. So we've got a handful of magic beans here, call them modern methods of construction, call them BIM, and we scatter those liberally. It's the latest ones, artificial intelligence. And these are the things that are going to solve all of our problems. But we don't fundamentally have the mechanisms in place in order to encourage evolution through the supply chain. We don't have the working relationships because we have a procurement process that sets us up into an adversarial contractual process that means all of our energies tend to be wasted arguing rather than working out how we're going to do the next, arguing about this project rather than working out how we're going to do the next one better together. And I think this is one of the things that we really want to shine a light on through some of the work we're doing at the moment is you can have all this modern methods of construction, you can have all your digital solutions, but we have to fundamentally look at the way that we buy construction as a process in order to support that change.
Mm. So Stuart, is there a link here between the quality of our procurement system and the safety of a project and delivering it?
Well, there's certainly a link between the kind of relationship that exists between the contracting parties and the quality of what we produce and the safety of the workplace and the product thereafter. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, when procurement works at its best, people are focused on finding solutions. People are focused on kind of innovating to meet the employer's requirements. That's what they're dedicated to, and that's how most of the people in this industry prefer to work. Okay, where it goes wrong is where the contractual framework sets up the parties to be in an adversarial relationship from the word go, whereby they're arguing not how to solve the problem, that they're arguing about the allocation of risk and how the kind of rewards are distributed throughout the team. You've got to get that sorted from day one, set the tone of the project right, and then kind of unfold it. That's how people in this industry want to work. That's actually what they're good at. They're good at problem solving. People don't want to kind of get involved in adversarial relationships, in claims, in kind of penny pinching all the time. They want to deliver work to clients and they want to be associated with projects that sit on their CV.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned something there. You said the word penny pinching, which is a nice transition onto our next topic, really. Stuart, when we started, you gave a brilliant intro to procurement. You mentioned location, experience, risk, relationship, and you said that there's a design and a construction procurement, and if you want to do those separately and together. But moving on to the next topic, which is probably one when people think of construction, it's probably the thing that people consider to be a barrier or a caveat or something that people focus on. So it'll be really interesting to get, I'm going to come to Ian first, really interesting to get your thoughts on this and the dangers of working in a system that focuses solely on pricing as the number one thing to probably drive down at the end of the day.
I think you've got to start with building a safer future. I mean, Dame Judith Hackett made it very clear in building a safer future. And I think she said, in the way in which procurement is managed can reduce the likelihood that a building will be safe. It reduces the likelihood that a building will be safe. We've done some work on, so, we've been interrogating this and looking at trying to understand where some of the problems are, and some work we'll talk about in a bit with Stuart, but we've done some initial work looking at dry lining. So the procurement process involves making sure people, it's providing a framework where people have the time and the resource to do the job properly. That's what procurement's there to set us up to do. So we asked some we took dry lining as one of the core packages within the interior sector. And only 2% of our members are never asked to start on site without effective design details. So think about that for a second. 2% are never asked to start on site without the right information. I mean, it's a horrific number. That's get on site, start building a wall. What wall? I don't know yet. Just start building something. That's effectively where the supply chain has been at times. So the average lead time on a dry lining package is 4 weeks. The norm is 3. That's 3 weeks to redesign it because the design's never right, to procure it, and to resource the labour in order to deliver that as a job. 3 weeks. And Friday to Monday is not exceptional. It happens. Can you get on site on Monday? And it's not exceptional. We've been planning these jobs for months, years, yet we're giving people weeks' notice at the end of it. And we're not taking into account the fact that we're looking at, if we look at the Building Safety Act, we start to talk about the need to have a collaborative system. The collaborative system can't be looking at the job as a bag of bits. It's got to be looking at the system together. Dry lining system is inherently relying on the door system in order to perform. It's inherently relying on the interface with the structure. It's inherently relying on the interface with the ceiling. We've got to get these details right, and we have to allow sufficient time for it. So the net result of that, so what's the output of that? Is 17% of the work done in the commercial sector on dry lining is rework. So at a time when we're demanding more sustainable, a time when we're demanding more efficient, we're doing 17% rework because we're not setting the jobs up right. And that's going to be design issues, it's going to be program issues, it's going to be workmanship issues, because in a time of, if everybody's mobilizing too quickly, anybody will do. The Building Safety Act is a really good place to start because it forces us to look at that overlap of stages of the REBA Planner Works. The REBA Planner Works basically says designers do less designing than they used to. A lot of that's done by the specialist subcontractors now. We're then relying on short amounts of time for specialist subcontractors in order to do some of that design detailing, which is quite oblique in the contractual structure that we have at the moment. So what happens? The butterfly effect happens. A little change here causes a big problem there. All of a sudden, buildability because we've changed the spatial coordinates because somebody's re-specified that part of the job, we now can't get access to that to build it. Now, all of these things happen, and how do they get dealt with? They get dealt with on the job by 3 people looking at them going, best I can do. And we re-specified based on best I can do at the time because we didn't plan properly. And within that, we end up with all sorts of problems that can manifest into quite serious issues. And whether or not they're inherent safety issues, certainly contractual issues, because as a sector, we spend 1.6% of our turnover on legal fees. That's double the norm. That's twice as much as anybody else has spent because we're quibbling about stuff at the end of the job because we didn't price it right, we didn't allow sufficient time. And when we talk about transformation, there's some really basic things through the procurement process that we have to look at. And that fundamentally is about making sure that we've priced in the risk and we understand the time risk, the design risk, and the material price risk that people are inherently having to carry, because there's a lot more risk in construction, or we're aware of a lot more risk in construction now than we ever have been. And the process is more complex as well. We've got more complex products, more moving parts. It's a much more buildings are much more complex than they used to be.
So Stuart, Ian mentioned a lot of things there. It's amazing. 17% of dry lining gets reworked, which if you think on a pricing aspect is a bit crazy, because that does nothing in terms of assisting on maintaining a budget or reducing a price on a job. Not saying that's correct. But what are your thoughts on just focusing solely on a price?
Well, I mean, there was a problem with the kind of traditional approach to single stage tendering, whereby everything is supposedly designed and then the whole lot is let out for the supply chain to kind of price, because as Ian says, the design often is kind of incomplete, invariably incomplete, and the assumptions made about the condition of the environment within which the fit out is taking place are invariably kind of wrong, because no one's got access to the space in advance. So I think there's more kind of possibility when you're involved in some sort of a negotiated kind of arrangement between the client and the main contractor, or perhaps even two-stage kind of tendering, whereby the broad principles of the approach, the preliminaries, the kind of profile of the supply chain are kind of agreed in advance, and then once the parties start to engage and start to do the kind of upfront planning, the upfront thinking, the upfront problem solving that's so often kind of missing. You know, it's this thing about kind of early supply chain engagement. You know, we used to talk about early contractor involvement. You know, everybody knows it's a good thing, and yet it kind of doesn't happen often enough. And the truth of it is that too many contractors, too many subcontractors, especially in the past, you know, find they're giving their kind of expertise to front-end problem solving, and then the contract gets let to somebody else. You know, and this just sets the kind of pattern of the adversarial relationships that we're trying to get away from. And so all of these things are kind of shaped by these early decisions that are made in procurement and how the store is set out. You know, we need experienced, sensible people, not only on the supply side, we also need them on the demand side. And we're coming into an environment here which is pretty kind of unprecedented in terms of skill shortage, in terms of commodity price kind of inflation. I mean, Ian talks about kind of dry liners. You know, these skills are in really short supply. And I'm afraid the harsh reality is, yes, the supply chain has lots of things they could do better, but clients also need to get themselves into the position of being the client of choice, so that contractors actually want to work with given clients. They want to work with them in a problem-solving way, because their skills and their expertise in the market we're now in are not so easily kind of sourced elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving forward, I think it's quite a nice segue, Stuart. So I just want to stick with you. This is all about, the next topic's all about tenders and contracts. Fundamental to construction. We all need them in many industries, but there's so much competition within projects and specifications, and that means specifications can be easily broken. Breaking tenders and contracts and specifications and things like that, is that adding fuel to a fire, or is it just healthy competition?
Well, I'll tell you the first point I'd make when you talk about contracts. I mean, we have a perfectly good set of kind of standard forms of contract. I mean, the best known is the JC Team suite of contracts. I just don't believe the kind of logic for why these standard forms of contract are amended so often. The standard forms of contracts have been designed to ensure an equitable distribution of risk amongst the contracting partners. And yet every client seems to have their own personal construction lawyer who advises on shifting that balance of risk allocation on a project by project basis. It's just kind of crazy. And, you know, everybody that I speak to on the supply side, you know, will always say that their preference is to keep the contract in the drawer. You know, they want to work in the mode of solving problems. That's how they prefer to work. Okay, but the starting point of an amended contract, you know, often with very onerous kind of allocation of risk onto the supply chain, is just a crazy way to start if you're looking for a collaborative relationship with the supply chain. And I just can't believe how often, you know, people on the contracting side say to me, you know, that they never actually work to a standard form of contract. It's always amended.
I think that might just be the nature of today's society, in a way that we sign contracts at will. If you look at the software and the hardware we currently use, has anyone read the terms and conditions Google or Apple or any of those big tech companies throw at us? Probably not. We just sign our lives away and away we go. Ian, what are your thoughts on breaking tenders, and is that adding fuel to this fire, or would you just class it as healthy?
To carry on my analogy of evolution, the standard contract is a dodo. They don't exist anymore. There's no such thing, as Stuart said. So there's nothing wrong with design and build, right? There's nothing wrong with value engineering. They're both sensible things. We do them in everyday life. That's how we procure stuff ourselves, right? We decide whether to buy it from Aldi or Tesco's or Waitrose. Yeah, we value engineer stuff. It's sensible, but if you put that into a climate where you are distorting, why do you change a contract? The only reason you change a contract is to transfer risk. And that can only be done if every party understands fully the risk that's being transferred and is fully signed up to managing that risk on behalf of the contract. So what we're talking about here isn't risk management through the contract, it's risk avoidance through the contract. And risk becomes like moisture. It soaks up, and it comes out where it's easiest to push through. And that ends up quite often being the specialist subcontractor. So, you know, I was dealing with a contractual issue this week, which is a cracking example of how risk moves through the supply chain. So this is a contractor who's been put on a fixed price, has gone back to the main contractor to say that, oh, we're struggling on this price. We're going to have to, we need a bit of pragmatism here. The main contractor strung them along a little bit, said, yeah, sort it out, don't worry, we'll get it all sorted at the end. They've carried on the work on the understanding that at the end of the contract, everybody's now getting contractual. So whether they will get the extended cost, they'll get some, but not all of it. The variations, lovely little trap on the variations have been issued in writing, copied to the site manager and the quantity surveyor, but the quantity surveyor's never responded. So we're now quibbling over whether those variations have been agreed or not. Even though that everybody was in the carbon copy, everyone could have resolved it at the time, but contractually, you know, so it's all very well to say leave the contract in the drawer, but fundamentally we don't do that, and we shift these risks through the supply chain. So the design risk, the unintentional designer, is the one that the others we've known about for years. The unintentional designer has been the one that's really crept up as we're seeing more onerous clauses around design detailing starting to creep in, and effectively that's the design detailing not being done in a structured way ahead. So the procurement process drives that, encourages that, and you know, the more you split these tenders around and spread them really thinly, the more likely you are to find somebody who quote cheap and will miss things out of the tender, will miss fundamental things out of your tender that will fundamentally affect the job as a whole. But as long as we've got it on price, that's all fine, isn't
it? so there's, as we're talking about, there's quite a lot of issues, but they all seem like they're known, and there are solutions to these if everyone has got a collaborative approach and working towards an end goal, the correct end goal, if you like. So the final topic that I just want to cover is, Ian, I'm going to stick with you if you don't mind. How can we get everybody's collective attention and opinions and go forward in the right way?
The work we do with Stuart and the University of Reading, and also with Barbour ABI and AMA Research, is we want to start to put some data behind this. So data-led change. There's been a lot of research into procurement, but in our sector, the fit-out sector, it's kind of the whip end of construction, right? All the tolerances are out by the time we arrive on site, the program's out by the time we arrive on site, and all the money's run out of the job. So it really is the whip end where most of these things manifest. It's also one of the more complex packages in construction, because there's a lot more bits involved in the interior section. So you know, it is very different, and it does require this. You know, we talk about the Building Safety Act, we talk about collaborative systems, but we don't, whilst we talk about them, we don't really know what they look like. So starting from where are we actually at now seems to be a pretty good starting point. So we're doing some research that's looking at some of the timings and some of the behaviours and trying to provide a bit more, just to quantify them a little bit more, and then using Stuart's good offices to provide a bit more of an independent dialogue around them. And as I say, FIS is a supply chain organisation. We're not trying to blame anyone. This is about empathy-led change. It's trying to say, look, where are the problems, and how do I need to behave differently? How do we need to behave differently? And if we need them to do something, what do they need to do? And yeah, and you talk about that 17% rework figure. Now, we've got profound labour shortages, yet 17% of the labour putting that wall's taken down again. I mean, you know, it's actually 20% of our labour, because it's the time involved in taking them down. There's waste in the system that we need to address, and we want to start to tease that out through this procurement survey that we're doing. So that's the reason we're doing it. For all the reasons I've said, we're a little bit like Madagascar. It's a different part of construction. It's got a different set of problems. We're quite often working in existing buildings as well. People talk about new build all the time. New build is probably the easier end of the sector. It's when you're working in buildings that the tolerances are out when they're originally built, it becomes even more problematic and even more difficult. So what we want to do is try and capture where we're at now. And this isn't going to solve everybody's problems, right? This is about starting a conversation, providing a little bit of data to carry that conversation on, and also giving people a bit of a toe to build out their own research as well, so they can start looking at how this relates to their individual businesses. So it's an opportunity for everyone to feed their views in. We're the voice of the finishes and interior sector. The voice needs ears, right? And this is our opportunity to give everybody a chance to feed in, to identify where they think the problems are, the challenges are, and then we can start to pull this together as a bit more of a thread, and start to have more mature conversations about how we can change. Because it might be really simple. Some of these things are really simple. Some of them are behaviours my mum taught me when I was 5, to be honest. Some of them are really that simple. But others might be, if you're allowing 3 weeks, why not make it 6? We have 6 weeks. We could probably sort a lot of this stuff out. That's double the amount of time we had before. And realistically, in the scheme of a whole building programme, a point of 3 weeks earlier, what difference would that make? Really, in the scheme of everything, what difference would that make? It's about better planning. It's about different starting points, setting hairs running in order to deliver better contracts.
So, Stuart, final comments from yourself. With this procurement survey that Ian's just described there, how important could this be if people are willing to share their voices?
Well, I think I'd first of all kind of echo Ian's point about the importance of starting with data and facts, okay, rather than starting with highfalutin grand kind of missions. Just to understand, what the hell is happening in this sector in terms of procurement practices, and building an argument and a set of potential solutions on the basis of an understanding of what's happening at the sharp end of the industry. I've read many reports. I've read too many reports over the last 20 years. Relatively few of them start with actually taking the trouble to understand what's happening on the ground. So I think if there was a key selling point that differentiates our research from the research of others, it's with that kind of reality of what's happening. And also, the people at this end of the kind of industry, at the end of the day, the kind of interiors of buildings is what kind of influences kind of value to kind of client organizations. That's what they're interested in buying. It's the interior environments that we kind of create. They're less interested in the kind of concrete frame that holds it all up. And so value is determined in no small way at this end of the industry. And it's been neglected in terms of the long-standing debates about industry improvement. And we want just to give this sector a stronger voice and a stronger degree of recognition of what the practical challenges are at this end of the business.
Fantastic. That's great. I haven't put a link in the chat or anything to the survey, but what will happen afterwards, after this webinar, is everyone will get an email and it'll have the link to the survey in there. So please participate in it.
Just to say, we are asking all parts of the supply chain, so it's suppliers, it's main contractors, specialists. There's different routes through the survey for everybody, and at the end, I'm not allowed to call it this, but there's a rant box, so you can put whatever you want at the end. If we haven't asked the right question, tell us, and you've got your rant box at the bottom. Sorry, Stuart, I know I'm not allowed.
It's a rant box that's not a rant box, but use it as a rant box.
Thank you.
Excellent. So we've run over a little bit on time, so thanks for hanging around, everybody, and Ian and Stuart as well. What I'll say is that you will receive that email with the link. Please share it and go and do the survey yourself. In that as well, there'll be an opportunity to ask any questions, because I know we're short on time now and we've run over. So if you have got any questions for Ian and Stuart, please use that email and the link in there to ask your questions, and I'll send them across, and we'll get an answer for you as soon as we possibly can. So yes, so that's the end of the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. It's very much appreciated. I'm not quite sure when the next one will be, the next webinar will be, but if you sign up for the newsletter, shameless plug there, you will find out in no time. So once again, thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you, Ian and Stuart. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for the opportunity. Attention, everybody. Take care.
Cheers, Ian. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Stuart.
Bye.